So the opening prayers, the altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang warje pedra no parje pege. Darpa dang tam chekin pe bardu cho parje patam chekit so jepe. Manam kadang yam pe sem chen tam che dewa dang den. Dug now dang drel nur du la da me pa yang dag par zog pe chang chu rin po she to parja. The action bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De che du sang mag ye ki bar du nga gi sam ge wala ko. Ma she bar du nga gi sam ge wala ko. Du de ring ne sung te ni ba sang dat sam gi bar du nga gi sam ge wala ko. Long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drin Chen Sawa Dangyu Par Jepe Pelden Lama Dampa Namla Kapsu Chio Yiram Kil Kor Gila Sog Namla Kapsu Chio Sangye Chom Den De Namla Kapsu Chio Dampe Cho Namla Kapsu Chio Pagpe Gendun Namla Kapsu Chio Pawo Kandro Chokyong Sung Me Cho Yeshe Kikchen Gang Den Panamla Kapsu Chio. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Jiangchu Ningpo Chi Ki Bar Sangye Nam La Kyam Su Chi Jodang Chagchu Senpai Choglang Deshin Kyab Su Chi Jitar Nyongi Desheki Changchu Tugni Keparang Changchu Senpai La Pala Terang Rim Shin Nepata Dejin Drola Pendondu Chagshu Semni Kegijin Dejin Duni La Pala Rimpajin Du La Paji. A short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam rua changshu bardu dagni kapsu chi dagi jinsogi pe sonaki drola penchir sangye drupa so. The four immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadang yampe semchen tamche dewa dang dewe gudang denpar jurchi. Dugnal dang dugnal gi gudan dralwar jurchi. Dugnal me pe dewa dang mi dralwar jurchi. Ye ring chak dang ye dang dral way dang nom la ne pa churti.
Thank you very much, Michael. Welcome, Ed Joseph. Good to know you're there. And Katie, good to know that you are there. Hope everything is well with both of you guys.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. So continuing with our discussion group, we have a small group this evening, starting out at any rate. So does anybody have any questions or comments? You know, sometimes having a small group like this fosters more conversation. So does anybody have any questions or something that you would like to investigate that we've been talking about? Or maybe something that we haven't talked about that you've been curious about? So does anybody have any suggestions of how to begin our discussion tonight? Okay, so you're leaving it up to me, and that's fine. Okay, so just as a reminder, you know, we talk, you know, discussion, you know, so we talk about intellectual things. There's intellectual Buddhism, and then there is practical Buddhism, the Buddhism that we practice. So we, you know, for these past couple of years on Zoom with COVID, we've been talking about the intellectual part of Buddhism most all the time. And starting this weekend on Saturday, we're going to be able to begin a more practical engagement with the practice of Buddhism. So I hope that you all can join us either in person at the Dharma Center at Trikung Dharma Surya Center in Virginia, or online with Zoom. So it'll be on this same channel. So it won't be difficult to find us, and we'll engage in some meaningful practice, and I hope that it will help to bring some of the wisdom that we have locked up inside of us to bring that out. When we rest our intellectual mind, when we rest our confusion, when we rest our physical body, the spirituality rises up. So that should be very productive, I would hope. So for tonight, let's talk about the in chapter 1 of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. We've talked about that the primary cause that we are trying to get to. What is our primary cause? Why is it that we are born? What is it that we have within us that wants us to seek a freedom, to be able to seek a happiness, to be able to seek an understanding, a wisdom of who we are and what it is that we have to experience in our lives? Why do we do this? So does anybody have any thoughts about this? Yes, Michael.
I believe we have a very slightly self-aware Buddha nature.
Okay, how does that manifest?
A longing for connection with connection with a vaster nature, connection with Dharmakaya, connection with the Buddha nature that is in all of us.
When did you recognize that?
Probably 1472. Okay. When did I recognize that? I recognized a yearning, a longing, that sort of really baseline desire for reconnection or for touching some sort of ultimate when I was very young. I put it in Buddhist terms probably about 20 years ago.
Gary, I saw you had a little bit of recognition to what Michael was saying. What's your experience?
Well, for most of my adult life, there's been an uneasy sense in me that the so-called truths that I had been raised with and been told about all my life had something missing, that there just was something not there. But I went along with it because that was what I was, that was the direction I was pointed in.
Well, what was it that you were involved in that sort of had, if I can say, had this kind of hole in it that wasn't being filled up? What was the tradition?
Well, the Judeo-Christian dogma.
Okay.
And as I surveyed, I guess, the landscape of the world's spiritual practices, I continued to see something missing because it's not that I didn't see any spirituality or see great spiritual teachers from various spiritual practices. But I thought that the truth was not to be found in anybody's set of particular rules. And I know Buddhism has, I won't call them rules, but it has tenets that we observe. But I have, into my later years, still been searching for some meaning that I find resonance in the whole idea of meditation and mindfulness. Finally, I found something that said the truth and the way is not out there; it's in here.
So being able to have some kind of a guide has been helpful to you, or
Yes.
or
Others, fellow travelers who are, I think, in one way or another, seeking that same sense of peace.
so there was an intellectual fellowship that you were kind of tuning into.
Well, I guess intellect is certainly part of it. It's not the end of it.
Okay, let me ask somebody else. Katie, how about you? Are you with us here? Okay, she might be.
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Have you? Can you answer? A question or two?
Absolutely.
Well, good. So the question we were trying to have everybody discuss was the idea of what is it that has been a primal cause within yourself? Did you recognize something? When did you recognize it? Can you talk about it at all?
I think a lot of it falls in line with what Gary said about the dogma of what is accepted as religion. For me, that religion never quite made sense to me. More of Mother Earth, nature, that type of explanation of our existence made more sense to me. And then later on, really the Dalai Lama, that's what brought me to Buddhism, if I'm being completely honest about it, because I started to, I first was exposed to him in Germany when I was stationed in Germany. And I remember thinking, I can't go see this man because then I won't be able to continue doing what I'm doing, because the nature of what his message was polar opposite from what I was doing as a job. And I just had a feeling that if I followed through with going and seeing him speak, that I would no longer be able to be in the military. So once I was out of the military and in a position where I felt I could research, I started researching the Dalai Lama's teachings and realized that his teachings were more of a catch-all net, and that as far as what he was speaking to, and that it goes much, much deeper. And the more I dug, the more down the rabbit hole I went, the more it resonated with me. It made sense, the logic of it, the reasoning behind it. And the Dalai Lama even said, research, find out for yourself, do your own research, do your own analysis. And that's exactly what I did. And the more I researched and compared different sources, and from what my gut told me and what I was learning through my own research, it just made sense. And so from there, I looked for an organization that was practicing, and that's how I came across both Gardroma and GBI at the same time. And then eventually it led me to the Fairfax organization as well. So in a very broad brushstroke nutshell, that's how I came to be a lay person practitioner.
Very good. When you went into the military, I mean, did you have a sense of spirituality at that point? What was
Absolutely.
yeah?
I did. I practiced yoga. I didn't know. So it was one of, if you can believe it, it was a Buns of Steel
It was what?
exercise video. It was a VHS tape, and it was an exercise video that taught Kriya Yoga or Hatha Yoga and Kriya Yoga. And I was using it as a stress reliever, but it planted the seeds of Dharma. It genuinely did. And the reason why I joined the military was because my family life was not conducive for me being self-sufficient. I knew as soon as I did any sort of higher education that I would get lost and that I'd probably flunk out because I didn't have enough discipline. So I was looking for a means of self-sufficiency. And for me, the military looked like a good option. And I wanted to serve something greater than myself. And I genuinely wanted to serve my country. And I did. And so now I feel I still am serving something greater than myself by practicing and learning as much as I can through this practice.
Very good. Thank you. I have one more question. That's, how old were you when you joined the military?
I graduated in May. I was 18 and I joined in June.
I see.
Straight out of high school. I didn't waste any time.
Right, right. Well, very
Hair on
good.
fire about a different practice.
I beg your pardon? What?
I said hair on fire about a different practice.
Right, right. So, Joseph, how about you? You gave us a good talk a few weeks ago, but I'm curious, about, when you were younger and when did you have a sense of looking for something, or did you have a sense of there was something within you that was later answered? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, for sure. I'm from Haiti. I came here when I was about 12. And in Haiti, I went to a French school by brothers and priests. So I was exposed to Catholicism. And when I came to the States, I was 12, and then from there, that root was in me. However, I did not understand. I did not understand what God, what Jesus. It doesn't make sense to me. And I mean, people deal with one of the 10 commandments is like not to idolize things. But meanwhile, within the Catholic religion, you have saints, different representation of, that didn't make sense to me. So around probably 15 years old, I had the urge to listen to gospel music, to listen to gospel preaching, even though that was not my background. So I began to listen to it. And around 20, I met my girlfriend, and she was attending a non-denominational church. Then I began to attend that church, which I attended for 24 years. And during that time, even though I was going to church, reading the Bible, I've taken Bible classes, New Testament, Old Testament, all that stuff. I still did not believe in, I didn't understand it. I'm a scientist. Things has to make sense to me. I have to experience it. So, but meanwhile, I was not an atheist per se, but I just knew there was some power within me that mirrors the universe. I had that understanding for whatever reason, right? And it was about maybe 12 years ago that I was living on Long Island, New York. And by trade, I was a school administrator in the area of finance. And grass, nice neighborhood, 2 kids, a dog, a wife. And I said, I said, there's more to life than this. And I remember that Saturday vividly. And then I said, you know what? I want to know who the creator is. Whatever that we call God, I want to understand it. I want to know it. And then from there, then I begin to have like dream visions. And it was not a good thing because it was like, I begin to hear things, I begin to see things. It was a little bit frightening at the same time. And being like a guy, I'm into martial arts and doing things that if I have a fear or something, I try to, to face the fear. And so I was reading, I'm well read and learned, and it just doesn't make sense until then I had the encounter. So meanwhile, nobody knew until I told people that for all these years, I never really believed because I didn't understand. Believing should be experiential, but it's really not until you have the actual experience. Then you have the wisdom of insight, you see, from that experience. So I knew there was something more. Whatever that something more was, I know when I looked to the left, to the right, it did not make sense. But meanwhile, that very book, because I'm pretty, I'm well versed in the Bible, because I even made the attempt to go to seminary school and I ended up leaving. That's one thing I did not finish because what they were teaching, it did not make sense. What they were teaching compared to my actual reading of the Bible, it contraindicated each other. So I said, that didn't make sense. So I left. And then from there, then I continued to read it. And there were times I said, I just really want to understand. And then I began to develop the insight that the book, the very book Bible tells you is not a literal book. The book of Job, for example, it says it's a literary book. It uses symbology, mythology, adages, proverbs. It tells you that. But people actually with master's degrees, PhD, that tells you, well, I believe the Bible literally, when it tells you that it's really not. So I know the direct answer to the question, I know there was something more within me. I felt there was something more, and therefore I was seeking. And through that seeking, then I discovered the truth. And this is the truth, is that what we are discussing is, and to do good, to experience and question. You can question all you want, because questioning is thinking, but the thinking, it's limited in itself until you have the first.
Oh, locked up. Okay, we'll come back to Ed Jones when he reconnects. So, Tom, would you like to talk about your experience? I know you were born into Buddhism, and but what was it, something that was very natural to you? And in other words, the Buddhism was very natural, or was it something that you had to kind of discover for yourself within that context of the Buddhism? How did it work for you?
Let's have Ed Joseph finish, I guess.
Oh, okay. Ed's back. Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. It looks like we froze. Yeah. So then from there, because then through my exploration to my exploiting the very science or psychology of this life, then that's when I saw that Buddhism, I mean, usually I try not to identify with any ism, but it's psychology. That's when I found out it was pure psychology. And I said, psychology is a science, that we can put it into practice. And that's when I made the connection that all the religion, all the so-called religion, they're seeking after the same thing. It's just different interpretation, different understanding, just different modality, if you will, but they just seeking the same.
Okay,
which is
very
to-
good. So I wanted to give everybody a chance to speak. So we wanted to understand, what was going on, that led up to, our discovering where we are at some point now, so Tom, did you have anything that you want to add about that in your experience?
I mean, basically, my story. I was always, I was born into a Buddhist family, and I was always been a Buddhist. So it's basically like
Did
almost
you have
like,
a feeling for it when you were a youngster?
oh, certainly did. It was almost like breathing. Yeah, I mean, going up to the monasteries and spending weeks and weeks and months up there, and sitting with the lamas, the Buddhist monks, and sitting on their laps and doing meditations with them. I mean,
So it was
I'd
never a chore for you, or
No.
something that your parents were making you do that.
oh no. I mean, staying up there for some long periods of times, I would I'd look forward to these times. It was very natural. It was almost to the point where when we watch these Buddhist movies and we see these children, that are very connected with the monks, and just walk, basically walk around with the monks holding onto their robes, walk just that was basically me.
How about your brothers and sister? How are you the youngest in your family?
Yes, I'm the very youngest.
So in relation to them, they were obviously brought up in the same environment.
Oh, certainly they were exposed more than I was into it. But
did you have a different experience to them, or
well, that's the thing. I mean, when they came over here to the States, they basically integrated with the with others, and when they came here, I guess Buddhism wasn't as spread in the
Well,
70s.
what about back in Korea?
Well, I mean, they would. I guess maybe their karmic connection wasn't as deep as mine.
That's what I'm trying to get.
They would go with they'd go with my parents or my mother, especially to the monasteries and stuff, and do the stuff they wanted to. But it almost seems like more of a chore to them.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, than actually something that was natural. So it was very natural for me. It was like I said, it was just like breathing. It radiates. I had like I said, in my previous life, I know that I have very, very deep connections with the Buddha, with the Dharma and the Sangha. So, and it was very fortunate of me to have caused enough merit to be reborn into a family that was Buddhist, and re-exposed and actually help further my studies.
Have you had doubts?
Oh no. It just really was, it was very natural. So
and how did finding the Vajrayana, because you grew up in a Pure Land, a Mahayana environment, correct?
Certainly.
So
it took me, initially it was definitely different, but it was still Buddhism. It was, when you went into the shrine room, who did you see? So Shakyamuni Buddha. So, and then it was just it might be a little different path, but that path all leads to one thing, to our awakening. So to say that this is right and this is wrong and this is wrong and this is right, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That you should be open. That, like I said, I was fortunate enough in this lifetime to be exposed to more Dharma, and like I said, this was almost like a natural progression. So I embraced it, and that's my personality. When I embrace, or when I tell myself that this is it, I go in full force, instead of half-assing something. I just don't do that. You know, if you're gonna do it all the way. Don't go partially in and then partially out and partially in. But if you do it full, you know, with your body and mind, there are realizations that you will gain that can't be ever explained. It
Okay.
can't ever be talked about, but
Right.
you'll realize it. So, you know, I'm very, very fortunate in that sense. So,
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to circle back to everybody and
Sure.
explore a little bit more about it, but I want to leave some room for Ed Jones to speak. And in your experience in your life, you know, would you mind sharing with us, you know, your sense of your spirituality, that, you know, that primal nature that has kept you, you know, connected with a tradition, a spiritual tradition, and how's that worked for you?
Well, I respect and envy the experiences that Ed, Joseph, and Tom have described. I have not had that kind of experience. I was raised an Episcopalian. I went to a Presbyterian Christian college where, according to some study, only 21% of the population in this Christian college with required religious services, only 21% believed in the divinity of Christ, supposedly. So this was a period that caused me to question. And
Were you there for the religious aspect, or were you there for the other training, you know, the academics that was being offered by that school?
I was there. It was a school of Davidson College in North Carolina. It was a school of, at the time it was all male, about 1,000 students. I naively thought that since it was a small school, you know, I was going to play basketball.
It was either basketball or golf, right?
I got there and Davidson had a big rise in the 60s in basketball out of nowhere. And at one point was ranked third in the nation. I mean, but it was evident from about the second day of college, you know, that I wasn't going to play basketball except fraternity ball. But that was, I went there appreciating the fact that it was a small school, a liberal arts school, and had a church affiliation, but I wasn't deeply into any of that. But I came out sort of questioning everything. And since then, I've been sort of a Protestant religious renegade, where I have interspersed periods of being attached to one church or another, and then at some point moving or having that interrupted for some reason, and then maybe having a period where I wasn't affiliated with anything for a while before I attached to another congregation. But it was always more a matter of the level of compatibility that I felt with the other people there, much more than what, as long as it was, much more than what label it was under. I mean, whether it was always Protestant, but whether, well, no, I had a Unitarian phase too, but well,
what about the spiritual aspect of it? Was there, what was your connection with that?
I think it was something I was always looking for, but only experienced in depth on occasion, where I would have the sense that I'd logged on to something, you know, bigger than myself, and that was a harmonious, you know, holistic experience. But then I wasn't always able to do that. And I was always probably too intellectual about, I mean, not intelligently intellectual, but intellectual in my analytical. I recently read a book by Harold Kushner, the guy that wrote Why Bad Things Happen to Good People, or something. I mean, this was not that book; it was another book. But he said you are. Man, Tom never had any doubts. Kushner says you're obligated to doubt, which was a very interesting perspective for me, and somewhat reassuring, because I always doubted anyway. Couldn't help it. And here was a guy saying that doubt is an indication of engagement. If you don't have some doubt, if you don't do some questioning, you're not really engaged. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I met people like Tom who've had a very different experience, but for me, it was comforting because I was always questioning everything anyway. You could never seem to get spiritual roots in the ground that lasted firmly, continuously. And I am now in an Episcopalian congregation that is kind of interesting, because I grew up an Episcopalian. I've been away from it for 50 years. And now I've wandered back into it, not deliberately, but because my wife went to some meetings over in this church and sort of dragged me in. But what I have found is I am less hung up on beliefs, or, the fact that I have to agree with everything said from the pulpit, or, I mean, what I feel like I'm in a community of people who are searching, who are at different levels. I mean, who respect where I am and I respect where they are, even though we don't agree on all the same things. And then a year ago, Michael says to me, Michael and I were talking, and he said, well, there's this Buddha, this introductory Buddhism thing, and you might be interested in it. So I thought, well, okay, yeah, I'd like to know more about that. I said, how long is it? He said, 8 weeks. I said, okay, I can probably make it through 8 weeks. And but I was looking at it as a intellectual thing. I mean, I guess like taking a college course or something. Well, I should learn more about this stuff. I was not looking to become a Buddhist. I don't think I'm looking to become a Buddhist now, but I am engaged in a way that I hadn't expected to be. But I need, if I'm going to continue with this, I need to be more big mind and less little mind. And I've not made that commitment. I'm working on it. I don't know what I'm doing with it, but
all right, I got two quick questions for you, and then I want to open it up and let anybody ask other questions of each other. If you,
Right.
And the question I have for you first is, explain Episcopalian to me. What it's Episcopal, right? What is it that makes the Episcopal different than Lutheran or Baptist or whatever?
I don't know, Episcopalianism, I mean, it's rooted in the Church of England.
Oh, that's Church of England.
Yeah, but I mean, I
What's
don't.
Presbyterian? I thought that was Presbyterian. No,
that's John Wesley and I don't know. I mean,
right, so Episcopalian is Church of England, is the Anglican Church.
That's where it's rooted in the Anglican Church. Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm not there because of that. I mean, that's just something I've learned. I mean,
but they have a lot of ritual like the Catholic Church, don't they? They have
some people call Episcopalianism Catholic light.
Right.
because there is a lot of ritual, and that was why I left it. I mean, I like, I don't, this ritual is just.
Do they take communion? Do they do communion and
Yeah,
confession?
They do. They don't do confession. They do communion. They don't have a pope. I mean, they don't have.
Well, it's the king or the queen, I guess, is the head of the church, right?
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, my attachment to the Episcopal Church is the same as my attachment 10 years ago to the Methodist Church. I mean, it's just, I like the people that are there, and I'm just not really hung up on the.
All right. So my second question is,
Yeah.
Is there a connection? Do you have a connection with what we call Christ?
Yes, but not.
Is it a connection with Jesus, or is it a connection with Christ? Or do you see the same, or you see it as the same thing?
Well, I guess they're somewhat different. I mean, a connection with Jesus, I would think, is a connection with a person. A connection with Christ is more, I see more on the divinity side. My view of Jesus is, well, I don't believe I don't believe everything the Bible says about Jesus. I mean, I'm much more attached to the human side of Jesus than I am the divine side. And what I think is that I guess similar to the way the Buddha's regarded. I mean, this is somebody who just did it better than anybody else, and therefore created a path for the rest of us to follow. But the divinity part, I mean, I'm not as engaged with that. I don't deny it.
But on the side of Christ, I mean, is there a divinity with the Christ?
It's cloudy to me.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the reason I've spent my life running around as a religious renegade. I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And does anybody have questions for each other? Just speak right up, please. Raise your hand, whatever. Everybody satisfied with whatever each other said?
I want to say again, I came on late. I heard Ed, Joseph, and Tom, and I envy the experience they've had. I've had much less clarity.
Do you seek clarity?
Yeah, more than I've got.
So if I can dig a little deeper then, because nobody else had any questions. One thing that we've tried over and over again is to make the point about is, the intellectualization can take you, a long way, and is an integral part of the process of being spiritual. But then there is the practical side of allowing yourself to experience that through practice, through a guided practice. So, we've sort of had this conversation before, but it begs to come back to it now. What is it that holds you back from saying, okay, I'm going to join the guys on Saturday and we're going to do practice, and I'm going to join and just to experience that, if for no other thing than just for the day?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, and I don't want to be the focus of.
No.
On the one hand, I'm more involved in a church. I mean, the church that I belong to than I've ever been before in my life. I mean, that was true when I found out who Lance was a year ago. And it's still true. And so I know it's, and there's a lot of other stuff, personal stuff going on, and I don't it's sort of a matter of spreading myself too thin. I mean, but the other part of it is, without making a commitment to Buddhism as others in the group have, I don't feel completely honest doing that.
Well, why not? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just trying to.
I don't know why not. I mean, I'm not doing, I mean, I'm reading the prayers at the beginning and the end of what we do, but I'm not, I'm not going through the rest of the ritual.
Do you feel like you're being blasphemous or I don't know what the exact word is, but you're being, contrary to your Christianity?
No, but, well, I don't know. I'm trying to make a commitment to Christianity that's more in depth than what I've made before.
Well, we
And
made the point many times that it's all the same, really.
Yeah, but I just to do too many forms of worship
Okay.
it gives me disequilibrium. I can't defend any of this.
All right. Well, I don't want to press it too much, but does anybody else want to speak about this, with their own experience about, what it is to do practice, and can you see the difference or the blending rather than the difference, but the blending of the intellectual part and then the practical, practice part coming together? How does that work for you? Or doesn't it work for you? And to what degree have you been successful with it? To what degree have you been unsuccessful with it? Would anybody like to speak about that? Okay, Ed Jones, Ed Joseph.
Yes,
Do you have a practice? Let me ask you that. Do you have a practice?
I do.
Okay.
So for example, in the morning, I do vipassana, right?
Vipassana.
Yes.
Yeah, Vipassana. We call it Vipassana. 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 Yes.
Vipassana.
It's insight meditation is the way we
Sure.
define it. Just okay.
Right. And also within the right, so Vipassana, that's from the Buddha. And in the Christian faith, there's something called the Jesus is a prayer, which is hesychasm or hesychastic prayer. Hesy, Hesycha.
I don't know what that is. I never heard that before.
Yeah, it's a contemplative prayer.
Contemplative prayer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do that. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I say words like a mantra, and at times I just don't say anything. I just sit and then just become aware of my whole sensation within my body, and then take whatever that I'm feeling within my body and expand it. Okay.
What if it's do you have sensation of negativity? Or is it always positive? It's always a positive experience.
Wow, it's a very good question. You know what? For the most part, it's positive, because the sensations that I feel, I don't give it a meaning, because I know it's impermanent. I know what I'm feeling at this moment for 30 seconds, for a minute, even sometimes for 3 minutes, right? And I said, okay, I feel like right now, as I'm speaking with you, with the group here, I'm aware of my feet. I'm aware I'm sitting down. I'm aware of my hands. I'm doing this like, simultaneously, not concurrently, right? So for the sensations that I feel, whether it's a good sensation or a bad sensation, and I say to myself, okay, I'm aware of it, then it's not gonna last. So I do that.
Do you ever sit down, or do you ever come to your meditation time and come with a conflicted mind, a troubled mind? Do you, how do you deal with that? Or do you not have that problem? Do you not have that issue? Does it not,
not anymore.
you don't have any conflicts or negativity or anything like that in your life? Any emotion?
I mean, emotions are there because they emotions are like, how do you say it? When I do feel something, I do, right? Somebody, right? So as I'm meditating, sometimes I allow a thought to, I don't stop the thought. People think you could, I just let the thought happen, right? If it's something like when I was younger, well, I said, okay, then I just bring it to the forefront. And I said, okay, when I was younger, this is what happened. And then I just stay there for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, however long. And then after that, it dissipates. So when the emotions do come, the feelings, emotions, feelings, sensations, emotions turns into sensation. Is it thumping? Is it something like moving? Sometimes I feel somebody like scratching, that type of thing. And then I just see it for what it is. This is at the subtle level that I'm dealing with it, right? Because I take the thought and I said, let the thought move, rather than me trying to try to intellectualize it, analyze it. So I try not to do that. But when I'm done, when I need to, better understand something, then I'll do perform the analyze logic, right? The logical analysis, and then, arrive at a point. But when I'm meditating, I don't do that. Because
Very good.
The reason for which, because the meditation is supposed to purify and refine who you are, especially the mind. Because, right, the mind brings about suffering, whereas the biology, the physiology brings about pain. So once I was able to understand that, then from there, then it just takes me to another level. So the intellectual aspect of reading the book, the meditative prayers, the prayers from the from the book,
from the 101 book you're talking about?
Yes, from the book that you provided.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So when I take a book like that and I read the prayer so that I can understand it. And at times I take 3 words, like the ha, hung. That's a mantra. But at the same time, the from an intellectual standpoint, that's the sound of the universe. So what I do, at times I say the words and I just let it vibrate to my body. So if I feel something, if I feel a sensation that it's not a pleasing sensation, that's the answer to your question, then from there, without going home, without even doing that myself, but I allow for my body to make that sound. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Michael, would you like to comment on this question?
No, thank you.
Okay. Would anybody else? Yes, Gary?
I keep something that I read as often as I can by Lao Tzu. And
By who?
By Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu? Lao Tzu?
Yeah, Lao Tzu.
The Tao Te Ching.
Yes. which I read from almost every night. I keep it by my bed, but this particular thing describes, pretty much describes where I am at with Buddhism. And I don't think that Ed has any more doubts than any of the rest of us. I think that we're all searching. That's the journey that we're on. And this piece by Lao Tse is about something he calls the unknown wanderer. And we're all wanderers in a way, I think. The unknown wanderer was asked by a monk about beginner's mind. When did you start with beginner's mind, and are you an expert now? An expert? Not at all, replied the sage as he continued to explain. I'm just a beginner, simply sitting zazen. After many hours, days, weeks, and years of practice, I finally reached the beginner's mind, free of any expectations, simply emptiness, boundless consciousness. I simply practice every moment in beginner's mind. So it's not like I'm necessarily trying to reach a destination in practice. There's not an end point. And there's not necessarily final answers. And what that is the core of what the message that Buddhism gives to me. If you're looking for a sense of finality, a sense of completion of task, I think that I would be missing the point.
Okay, well taken. And we're gonna, that's a really good point. So we're gonna come back to that. Thank you. Katie has your hand up. What would you like to add to this, Katie?
Thank you. So it was kind of a segue. Well, I remembered that
Would you
when I
mind
was
turning
stationed
your
in Korea,
camera
that
on
was
so we
actually
can?
my first real exposure.
Would you mind turning your camera on? There you go. Thank you. Okay.
I'm busy putting my new home together, so and I'm listening while I'm doing that. So I remember the very first time that I went on a tour when I was stationed in Korea, and it was a temple tour, and I had no idea what it was. So I was like, let's do it. And it was through a bus, and they took us all around the town, that was the outside of the base town. And they would have these magnificent temples that were and fortresses around the temples. And it was just in the middle of the city. And
Where was it? I'm sorry, where was this?
in South Korea.
In South Korea. Okay, sorry,
Yes.
I didn't get that. Okay.
That was my first real, so I practiced yoga when I was 13. And, you know, like I said, it was before the internet. So I didn't even know really what yoga was. I just knew that it helped relax me. And that was pretty much all I knew about it. But then my next exposure to Buddhism was when I was stationed in Korea. And I took a temple tour, that's what it was called. And they would show us these magnificent temples in the middle of the city. It was a bustling city, you know, loud but when you got inside the temple area, it was peaceful. And I could feel the reverence. I could feel there was power to the peace, but not a commanding power, more of like I'm home kind of feeling. And but it was my life then was so chaotic that again I didn't really research it. but I remember I held it within my mind, and I took these magnificent pictures that I then lost. But yeah, I just remember feeling, wow, there's something to this. I need to look more into this. And I guess I'll really share with the group.
Katie, I'm sorry, you keep breaking up. Katie, you keep breaking up. So maybe it's better that you turn your
Yeah.
camera off because it's taking up your bandwidth. So let's try that because your audio was fine before.
Right.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay. Okay. No. So then where I am now in my life is I choose this practice and this lifestyle and this learning and discovery. There were some obstacles that I was facing, and I had to make a choice to either choose my old life or to break away and continue my spiritual practice, as well as start this new life. And so that's where I'm at right now. And it is in part because I believe what I'm doing is the correct path, is the correct method. And I've also been in situations where I've called on the practice for what it's supposed to do, and it has followed through, meaning I was being threatened, and I called a protector, and that protector helped me. So
Where was the
there are-
threatening come from? Please, where was the threatening come from? Was it external to yourself or was it within yourself?
So I've had situations where it's both, right? Where you get into these thought loops and you have to, or one would prefer to stop the thought loops because that can just drive oneself crazy. So I say the mantras, and that single pointed concentration breaks those thought loops. So that's absolutely a method I use. The other one was I was being physically attacked. And all I could do was call out Achi in my mind, but I screamed it in my mind, and that individual just stopped exactly what they were doing, just dead in their tracks, and they just backed off and they backed away. So I've had tangible evidence that I can hold in my hand, and I know that this is true, along with my own meditative experiences. So really the only obstacles that I face now are time, having time to practice, but I'm always trying to be mindful and meditative in my just being. And this practice absolutely helps.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. That was very good. Thank you. Would anybody else like to talk about their experience of practice, bringing intellectual Buddhism together with practical Buddhism? Okay.
Is it possible I could read a smaller excerpt that it really connects,
Sure.
and, whatever is interdependent arising from connection is without sensation,
Is without?
is without sensation and without birth, without end and without permanence, without coming and without going, without division and without unity of meaning, all conditions fully released, teaching released. it's just it's so hard, I mean, to just let go. It's easy to say, but with all of our interdependence that we have, everything around us, every person, everything, we get these teachings, these intellectual teachings, that everything is empty, that nothing is without sensation, that everything arising from connection is without sensation. But without practice, these are just empty words. That's all they are, just words, just babbled words, just writings on a piece of paper. And through enough practice, these things become, you start realizing your true nature. And once that starts, there's no going back.
Well,
That's it.
to try and be clear, this true nature, how would, I know it's a non-conceptual thing,
Sure.
but at the same time, we need to be able to have an object, or do we approach this with no object and hope, wish, expect that it's going to reveal itself? How do you think that works?
Through self-examination, through what's very important is the causes and the conditions have to be there. We can practice, we can say these mantras, we can do, but once the causes and the conditions are ripe, that's due to our karma, we can really see within our true selves, something that's always has been. There's no you can't explain it with words. There's just no words that can be used to explain that.
Well, to like you just said, to examine yourself. When you examine yourself, are you going through a series of identification points that are being exhausted? Say, oh, I think I'm this. Oh, well, I'm not quite that. I'm more this. And then you go through this whole period of things. Does that make some sense? Is that a good question?
Certainly, you have to exhaust all avenues until
So in other words, all those objects.
Exactly. We have to go through them, exhaust them through fully. And once they're completely exhausted, then maybe we might get that little bit of insight, that little bit of that glimpse, that little tiny glimpse. And more we do it, and we have to have, there has to be some faith and devotion to it, confidence and devotion that this is, this is ourself. This is our true self. Once we start that, there's no going back. There's no going back. There is no ceiling. But it's very difficult. So, Katie, I have so much compassion for you. I hear it in your voice. When I hear your voice and hear the suffering that you've gone through and that you're going through, I wish I could take some of that suffering for you. I really do, sister.
I would not allow you to take any of it. I appreciate you saying that, but I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Thank you. Just being here is a reprieve from it. So thank you.
So now to put this in a context, This was a way of being able to have a discussion about the primary cause, chapter 1 of the Dual Ornamental Liberation. You know, that we have this primal cause within us, you know, and this primal cause is for lack of better words, to be recognized, this wisdom, this compassion, whatever you want to call it, to come up and to be recognized and so on. So in this book, The Dual Ornamental Liberation, it's put in the context of Buddhism. So what we're trying to recognize is true nature as our Buddha nature. And Buddha means the awakened one. So whether we replace the word Buddha with Christ, or we replace it with Lao Tzu, or we replace it with Mohammed or Moses or any of the great avatars, spiritual beings that we might have read about or heard about or whatever, it would have the same meaning to it. And it's like that there is this spirituality that we have, whatever you want to call it, whatever of those words suits you, or maybe they all suit you, that there are degrees in which we are approaching that true nature. So this is what this discussion was really about, was to realize, to see where we are in that progression, because it starts off as a disconnected person, someone who doesn't recognize spirituality at all, somebody who is living day to day, moment to moment, you know, in a survival kind of an atmosphere to maintain their physicality and to whatever degree they can, their intellectualism. And there's a lot of people who are fighting for their lives, literally, in war zones and so on. But there are also people who are safe and far removed from any kind of armed conflict, who are in an intellectual battle with themselves and with other people that are around them, who have no sense of their spirituality too. So it doesn't have to be that they have to be in this, you know, terrible thing. They can be in a terrible self-imposed intellectual prison, so to speak. And they are disconnected. So that's, you know, one group of people. Of course, this would be the most fundamental of the groups of people that would be in that. And I don't think any of us are in that group. I think we're fortunate enough to have been able to move past that. And now maybe some of us are in what's called the dubious family, the dubious group of people who are kind of, you know, they're listening, they're kind of getting involved, but at the same time, they're not jumping in and so on. And we've all go through that. You know, it's part of our doubts and so on like that. And maybe some of us more than others, but it's a perfectly natural thing to do. And to be able to investigate that doubt, to be able to look at that doubt, that dubious nature that we have. You know, we may attend teachings, we may read books and so on like that, but at the same time, we're waiting for the right conditions to be able to give us permission, to give us the clarity to say, oh, the time is right. Let me go a little bit further with this. And there's no prejudice on any side that someone is in any of these kinds of situations. We've all been in these situations. So the dubious family is the next one. Then the one after that is called the hearer family. And the hearer family in Sanskrit is called the Shravaka family. So in our prayers, we recite that name every day, you know, the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas. The Shravakas are the hearers. They are the ones who are intellectualized, and they are motivated to engage in practice. But the motive is a selfish motive to overcome or out of fear. It's not that it's motivated by fear, but there maybe that's a twist of the right words there. Maybe it is motivated by fear that if they don't do this, that they're going to be missing something. In other words, the opposite of that would be that they're doing it out of love and they're doing it out of compassion, but they're doing it out of fear that they need to do this. Otherwise, they're going to miss out on something. So this is the hearer family. This is the Shravaka family. So the hearer family, those who fear samsara, the ocean of suffering, if they don't do this, they're going to be drowning in the ocean of samsara. They are yearning to attain what we call nirvana, this transcendence of the suffering of samsara into this nirvana, into this freedom, although it is temporary. But nevertheless, it's there before us. We're intellectualizing it. Oh, that's where I want to be, is in nirvana. And these beings, like I said, have a selfish mode, that they're doing this for their own aggrandizement, for their own benefit. They're not concerned with others. In the beginning, we need to take care of ourselves first. That's clear. We need to be able to say, okay, I have a long-range plan to be able to help others, to be able to help my children, to be able to help grandchildren, to be able to help brothers and sisters and people across the world and so on like that. But first, I've got to be able to take the time for myself to get a handle on what this is and who I am and so on like that. So there is that. But at the same time, we can hold on to that a little too long. And the Shravaka holds on to it too long. The Pratyeka Buddha is a Shravaka who has now had some experience, has now had some glimpses of what that freedom is, of what that true nature is, and has become arrogant about it, has become such that they don't want to share it with other beings. If they're questioned about it or they're confronted, whatever, they might tell you something about it, but they won't give you the background. They won't tell you how they came along with this, as if they, miraculously discovered this for themselves. And there's this conceit, there's this arrogance that is permeated through that. This is the Pratyeka Buddha. Pratyeka means the individual liberation. Pratyeka Buddha. The Buddha means liberation. So Pratyeka means the individual liberation. So they have no compassion to be able to want to help other beings to attain this. They'd rather be by themselves and be in their glory, self-imposed glory, than have to share it. Maybe out of fear, because their attainment is very tenacious. It's not rooted in a firm foundation. And if they expose themselves to the questions and to the challenges and to the doubts that others would present them, everything would fall apart. They don't have the stability in their experience to be able to withstand that kind of examination. So they remain in this Pratyeka Buddha family. So there's the Shravaka family, there's the Pratyeka Buddha family. Both are hearers, but they're selfish. That's the main point here. Then there is what we call the Mahayana family. And this is the middle way family. This is the great vehicle family. So this is the Buddha, remember, this is the supreme nature, or maybe I shouldn't use that word. It's the true nature trying to say, okay, where are you in relation to yourself as being your true nature? You're disconnected, you're dubious, you're selfish, but here is the one now, the Mahayana family, who says, I'm there. I am there. I am with you. I am trying to understand. I see this as a progression, and I'm on the path. And I see this path as one that is taking me through all these dichotomies, all these choices, all these dualistic things that are part of my human experience. Because all this is about human experience. Like Tom said, the causes and conditions. So we're waiting for the causes and conditions of being a human being to be able to have these glimpses of realization and recognition and so on. So this Mahayana family is the realization of the middle way, of being able to say, there is this safe zone that I can go to where I can kind of, vacillate back and forth. I can look at the, the vicissitudes of life and not be threatened by them. To be able to have a meditation, a calm abiding meditation called Shamatha Meditation. And when we stabilize the Shamatha calm abiding meditation, then what comes up is the Vipassana meditation that Joseph was talking about. The Vipassana is the insight meditation, where this wisdom that we have already within ourselves that is locked up because our emotions won't let it out. Well, once we begin to recognize this true nature and we begin to open up, it begins to break apart. And then we get shoots of light that are coming through, as this vice grip that we have on this true nature begins to open up. So we begin to get glimpses of that true nature. So this is all part of the Mahayana family. And then after that comes total realization that we are that true nature, whatever you want to call it, whether you call it Christ, whether you call it Buddha, whether you call it Lao Tzu, whether you call it Moses or Mohammed, whatever tradition you come from. And notice, I didn't call it God. It could be, some people might call it God, but it is something that is within us that is we are part of this supreme display, and whether there is this supreme being who is pulling all these switches and flipping all these dials and doing all these things that is controlling us, we can't say yes or no. It doesn't really matter to us because we realize that all these causes and conditions are what we are navigating through. And how those causes and conditions manifest is part of what our behavior dictates for us. Some of it is apparent, some of it is not apparent. But nevertheless, we have to take responsibility for it. So by being a spiritual person, we're connecting with this true nature. And so we intellectualize, what this true nature is like. We use similes. It's like this, it's like that, it's not like this, it's not like that. We do all that. But when it really becomes real is when we have the experience. And that comes from some kind of transcendence from the intellectual. So we call it, a practice, whether it's a practice or whether it's a prayer, but what it really means, it is a one-pointed mindfulness. A one-pointed mindfulness. One-pointed mindfulness means we're not thinking about two things, or three things, or four things, or five things. It's one thing. And for us to be able to get there takes a system for us to be able to follow, a guide for us to be able to do it. And it's the kind of guide that we can kind of take some hints from our teachers, but we develop it in our own way. So it doesn't have to be this dictatorial way in which things are done. We can take some advice, but we have to experiment with it until we find the right combinations of the causes and conditions for us to be able to have those glimpses. So there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, it's not the kind of thing that is going to instill greater fear in us. It's not like that. We all know, we all talk about intellectually and so on, and we read from other people who have had the experience that it is love, it is compassion, it is joy, it is a sense of balance and equanimity, and we call it bodhicitta. So with those thoughts in mind, that's what this chapter is about, to recognize this is what we're trying to recognize. There was a thing many years ago when I first got into, spirituality and reading different things and everything. There was a book called How to Know God. And it was a guidebook about, what to be thinking about and everything. And one of the statements that was in the book was, if God is God, the spiritual being, and God created all this, God created all this to be able to recognize himself. And that became a very powerful statement to me. Because we've given ourselves the gift of life. Later, I was able to understand that we give ourselves this gift of life in order that we can recognize this true nature, and ultimately to be able to recognize it in this particular life, in this three-dimensional life, but then also to recognize that there's other dimensions, there's other aspects to life that as a human being, we just don't recognize. So when we have this true nature experience, that becomes obvious to us. It becomes, we see all the possibilities. It doesn't have to be defined. It's just we see that we are something that is beyond just being a simple human being. So one thing that has helped me, especially in the past year, is I was really impacted by the fellow who was in Star Trek, who went up on the spaceship for 15 minutes. He was floating in space. What's his name? Captain Kirk. You know what I'm talking about?
Shatner.
William Shatner. Thank you. And he came back and he was so overcome with emotion. His mind was blown, from this experience. And I've been here before, in my own crazy way. I've been here before, but he really gave me a reason to stand back and think about this for a second. And imagine that you are coming into the solar system from somewhere out there. And you're looking at the solar system and you're locked in to coming to the planet Earth. And you have all these expectations of where it is that you come from, in whatever kind of a space vehicle you're traveling in, and you're about to encounter earthlings. And the earthlings are all kinds of sentient beings. They're animals, they're insects, they're human beings, and so on. And what is in store for that being coming in from space? What is that realization of what is on this planet going to be? And to look at ourselves and recognize that that's who we are. Now, who do you want to be? You want to be the people that are in conflict with each other? You want to be the people that are stealing from each other? Or would you rather be the spiritual being and be recognized by that alien coming in on a spaceship and say, take me to your leader? Who is your leader? Is it the guy with a AK-47? Or is it the guy with, the keys to the vault that holds all the money? Or is it the guy who's sitting calmly in meditation position going, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Hum, Om Hum. So that's it for me. Any comments? Follow up?
I wanted to react to something that Gary said earlier about journeys and destinations. Bill Russell, who's a legendary basketball player, but also a philosopher of sorts, wrote a piece in Sports Illustrated, this is years ago, that was entitled, "Success is a Journey and Not a Destination." And the more I think about that, you can substitute a lot of words for success. Education is a journey and not a destination. Faith is a journey and not a destination. Spirituality is. So I found Gary's comments about that meaningful, and they sort of, they're very consistent with the way you approach your whole leadership role, Lance. I think in this enterprise, I mean, we're not trying to get to a certain place. In fact, if we think we've arrived somewhere, we may be in trouble, because that shuts down growth.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, the path is the place we want to be, because we're already where we need to be. We just don't recognize it as being that.
Right.
Lance, if I may, when 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when I said to myself that there has to be something more than just this, the working, taking care of the kids, the family, including going to church, because I was going to church and I was reading the Bible, all that stuff. But I said to myself, there's something more. And I said, whatever that something more is, I need to understand it. That's what I said then. But what I wanted to do is to actually experience it, to become one with it. So the journey is the process. The destination for me was to have that experience. So now, given the actual experience, the process along the way, I recognize then to now, like right now, it's a destination. From where I was then, just to say there has to be something more, that has to be something more. That was a destination that I wanted to arrive to. That was a destination I wanted to get to. And once I am here, given that experience each day and every moment, when it comes to my awareness, it's fine-tuning it because it's process-based. It's a process. And that process is the awareness, with science, to know, is to have the knowing in the now that 10, 12 years ago, what was my destination? I am there right now. So each day, you see, each day, I'm just making it a little better. Just refining the process. It sounds philosophical, but I don't mean to be philosophical, but I don't know other way to really say it. So each day it takes for me to be aware that experience, once you have it, it is so peaceful. It is, and yet you still have to live. In the manner of living, working, dealing with people, sometimes I still deal with the most aggressive people or person. And yet I recognize that person. I said, you know what, maybe this person's having a bad day. And sometimes I just look at that person, not say anything. It's like, you're not saying anything? Right? So, and as Len's, touch upon, is that all of us have it, whether we're aware of it. That's whether we're aware of it or we prepare, right? Because there's some stuff you have to do. So in my case, I had to prepare my body. I begin to not eating as much. I begin to fast, even though I love to eat, people didn't tell me to. When, for example, the church used to say, oh, for people to fast like like for 5 days, for 7 days at the beginning of the first year, I didn't care for that. I never did that until I arrived to to myself. And one time I fasted for 42 days, no food, just water. How did it happen? One day at a time. One day at a time.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So there is a metaphor that we use, to talk about, to be able to see our Buddha nature. And we use the metaphor of a glass of muddy water. We scoop up, in the bottom of the ocean of suffering, we scoop up this muddy water and we let it sit there, and we can't see through it. It's just mud. It looks terrible. It smells terrible and everything. So this is like the disconnected family, just completely opaque. You can't recognize anything in that glass of muddy water. But then as you let that water sit, if you let that glass sit, that slowly, all that junk and everything, all that mud begins to settle down. And at the very top, would be the clearest point where you might be able to start seeing things. You're not quite sure what you're seeing, but it becomes clearer. And the more you let it sit, the more clear that top portion of the glass becomes, until finally you let it rest there for quite a period of time, and all the mud settles down. And then what's left is this, half glass of water that is clear now. And so each of these stages of this Buddha, of this self-aware family, becomes clearer, 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 the more that we're able to settle down. So as Ed Joseph was just saying about his being able to settle himself down, he even gave up, he used fasting as a tool to be able to help use his physical body, his physical energy, for the energy to be able to quiet the intellectual mind, to be able to open up the spirituality experience. And then when he did that, then things became clear. He began to see the clarity of that glass of what was muddy water and now has become clear. So that's a very useful analogy. Resting and using technique to be able to do that. Okay, well, unless anybody has some other comments, we can do our dedication, but I would love it if somebody would say something.
Thanks to Katie for sharing what she did.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you to this group for being this group. It helped give me the strength to make the moves I needed to make.
Okay. Michael, I think you're the Yomze this evening. Will you do our dedication prayers? And tonight, concentrate on the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun, please.
Very good. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate root of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me in mind, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by a wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of the Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings, of all beings.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. That was a good conversation, good discussion. Thank you, everybody, for being.